Welcome to Breathe California TV. When we started 30 years ago, this show was called Environmental Concerns. Today, we've got a real fast-raising elective official, Matt Mahan from District 10 in San Jose City Council. We're going to talk to him about the accomplishments in his 2 years on the council and where he thinks City of San Jose government ought to go. So after this public service announcement, we'll be back with Matt in about 30 seconds.
It's given me a chance to go out and be with people who has the same problem. And it helps you to manage your life better too, because you hear different things from each person. And it's just been really helpful in many ways.
Welcome back. This is Breathe California TV. Breathe California is the lung health organization for the state of California. I've been doing this show since 1992, and we try to focus on something that the medical profession isn't very good at, which is prevention of damage. So I'll be talking to Matt about a number of things which, if done better, will result in better health for all of us, like mass transit or climate change programs. So Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks for having me on Breathe California, and congratulations on 30 years. That's quite a milestone.
So one of the things that people often don't realize is how big your council districts are. 100,000 is almost as big as any other city in our county, and twice as big as any city where you grew up in Santa Cruz County, which was Watsonville, right?
That's right. I grew up down in the agrarian, just outside of Watsonville, in a very agricultural area, much smaller than here. So
when you left here, you sold Driscoll Farms off to pay for your college tuition?
Yeah, no, not quite. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a letter carrier. You know, I came to San Jose as a commuter student. I took the buses over Highway 17 every day to go to Bellarmine here as a work-study scholarship student. They gave me a great deal. I worked on the maintenance crew in the summers, and they forgave my tuition. So that's how I first started coming over here.
Well, that's a great deal. I put myself through my last 2 years of college doing much the same thing, being a resident advisor in dorms.
There you go.
But just to continue your story, I've taught the last 20 years at Santa Clara. Is that where you went afterwards?
Well, so I went to Bellarmine for high school and then went back east to Harvard for college. Spent 4 years out there, also as a work-study scholarship student. Had a job throughout college to pay for it. Met my future wife there. Studied a whole range of things: politics, philosophy, economics, things that interested me. So I left with no marketable skills, and then came back, and kind of like my mom was a teacher, I decided to be a public school teacher here in San Jose for a while. I taught out in Alum Rock, Joseph George Middle School. And then I won't bore you with all the details, but I ended up in the tech sector building what we called civic technology, tools to help voters register to vote, track what their elected officials are doing, do advocacy, those sorts of things. And then ran for city council a couple of years ago.
Well, I'm very pleased with your citizenship work. You and I were talking off air this June election. What kind of turnout did we have amongst people that could vote?
It was low, and as you pointed out, statewide, very low, looks like under 20%. Our county tends to turn out at a higher rate, but even so, I believe it was just 35% of eligible voters turned out here in our county, which is one of the lowest in recent history. And I attribute some of that to people not feeling like the top of the ticket. There's no presidential cycle, and the governor just beat a recall recently. So I don't think there was quite as much energy around the top of the ticket, which tends to be what gets people out to the polls. But I think it's important, I'm sure all of your listeners are well aware, important for people to understand just how much impact those lower level offices have. I mean, the local level has so much impact.
Well, and almost all of our higher, I'm not even sure higher is the right term to use, but Assembly, State Senate, members of Congress and statewide officials are almost all ones that have served in local office to start their careers.
That's right.
So pretty significant numbers. Well, when you were trying to encourage more people to participate in our democracy, what kind of things were you doing?
You know, what we discovered when I was working on the technology side of things, building tools, was that it was less about the technology and much more about creating what we would call a social experience, it being something that people were doing with their friends. I guess another word for it would be community driven. If you could get people to have conversations with their friends, invite a friend to join them to do something, meet up offline, that really had a big impact on engagement. So we always tried to design the mobile apps and the social apps that we were building around interactions between people, conversations, discussions and debates, collective action. And what I've found offline as a candidate is the exact same thing. If you can get people together in small groups and have meaningful conversations and help people understand how they can play a role in shaping the future, I find that people get bought in and excited and want to participate. When you just kind of shake your finger at people and tell them it's really important and you have to go vote, I don't find that really moves the needle.
Yeah, when I was teaching, I would often bring in voter registration cards or have party officials come in and try to do it. And I was very distressed that 35, 40 person class, I don't know how many were registered, but I typically only have 3 or 4 that'd be willing to pick up the registration forms.
Yeah, we have, those of us who care and believe in our democracy and our system of government have to do a better job of explaining to people how the process works, why it matters, how it impacts their lives, and then make it easier and more fun and more communal. I'm a believer in election day being a holiday and making it fun, have people actually celebrate our democracy and make it a part of people's culture, not just this thing this task that they have to check off the list.
So you're not worried about them all going to Santa Cruz for the beach on a day they might have off?
It's a risk, but hey, if they mail in their ballot beforehand, they've earned it. I don't know. I'm open to other creative ideas. The research is pretty clear. The best ways to turn out voters are to knock on doors and have face-to-face conversations. And the other one is event-based, getting people together for parties and discussions and debates and so that's, I really think it's got to be something that it's got to become a cultural norm and part of the community.
Do you feel like you have a chance to enhance those things as a member of council, or is that something you kind of had to give up?
No, I do. I think that our city has an important role to play, and I just refer back to a program the city had in the past, and there have been many iterations, but one that your audience may remember was something called SNI, the Strong Neighborhoods Initiative. And I think that at the local level, we would do well to invest in neighborhood associations and HOAs and other local community associations. I think that is really the foundation. We might call it civil society, but helping people to organize with their neighbors, with other like-minded people. That's really the bedrock of democracy in a lot of ways. You get people engaged and starting to feel a sense of ownership and responsibility over what happens in their neighborhood. And then I think it's not such a big leap to decide to care about a city council race or some other elected office.
So in the recent June election, a number of my friends and neighbors complained to me about getting glossy paper suggestions on who to vote for, and
Yeah.
others tell me that social media works better. Do you have a feeling for whether social media is helping the problem we've been talking about or making it worse?
Well, that's a good question. Just on the point about the mailers, I don't love getting them either, but unfortunately, it does seem that you have to be what they call multi-channel. You have to be willing to reach people in different ways, because some people look at the piece of mail, some people look at the social media posts, some people respond better to an email or a text message. You know, you've just got to try to reach people in a lot of different ways to break through. Of course, any and all of our spending in politics really is dwarfed by all the spending on corporate brands and products. So we have to work really hard to even just reach people with a message of civic engagement. In terms of your question about social media, you know, sadly, you know, the company that I started at least really had a very positive vision of organizing people around shared interests, for discussion and debate, for collective action. And we certainly saw a lot of that happen. We helped millions of people participate in their democracy and helped with registering people, helped people understand what their elected officials were doing. So I'm very bullish in the long run on the potential for social media and, I would say, information technology more broadly to provide the tools and information people need to be civically engaged and fully participate in their democracy. Sadly, however, the algorithms and the logic of the big social networks, you know, from Facebook and Twitter to newer companies like TikTok, they're biased toward what's most engaging. That their business interest is in showing people content that will most engage them. And I think, unfortunately, that plays to some of our baser instincts. We know that people find things that they're scared of to be more engaging. Things that are sensationalized and kind of outrageous are more engaging. And so if the ultimate measure of worth, of value online algorithmically continues to be how engaging it is, I think that's a real risk for our society. So no, I'm not real happy with what social media as a tool has meant for our civic discourse. I don't know that it's made it better, but I think there are silver linings. I think it has made it easier for people to get information, to find other people to talk to discuss and debate. But I'm worried, and that's a whole long conversation. I don't think we've really figured it out yet.
Well, let's go to some substantive issues that
Sure.
you've been confronting. Last time I saw you, I mentioned as a college professor for 25 years at San Jose State, I would walk from my parking lot 3 blocks to campus, and every 20 feet there was a square area that, I don't know, 5 feet by 5 feet, that was just raw dirt. And obviously, when the development went in, the city had required trees, but they were long gone. And so I'd go 3 blocks and not see a tree when it's very clear that trees have an incredibly significant impact on how good we feel about where we live and work.
Well, Terry, you and I know share a personal passion for trees. You mentioned me growing up in Watsonville. The place that makes me happiest is just being outside, walking around near trees, especially old trees. It's just it's a magical thing. And so I'm worried, as I'm sure you know, our urban forest, our canopy here in San Jose has been declining now for quite a few years. And the benchmark for a healthy urban forest is around 20% canopy cover. So one in every 5 square feet, when you're looking down through an aerial photo of the city, would be a tree. It would be canopy cover, providing shade and clean air and water, moisture retention, all the rest, all the benefits. We've declined now to nearly 15, down to about 15%, and are still heading in the wrong direction. And some of that is development. Part of it's about holding developers accountable for actually planting the trees that they commit to plant when we have a project. We've seen some examples where that hasn't always happened, and that's really on the city. We have to be auditors and have to make sure that whatever's in the development plan actually happens. But I think an even bigger part of the challenge is that San Jose, unlike quite a few cities, puts the full burden of maintaining street trees and the sidewalks that get lifted up and the streets that get damaged on the property owner. And so there's a real clear financial disincentive for a homeowner or a small business owner to plant additional trees, because in the long run, the full cost of maintaining the trees, fixing the sidewalk is on them. The estimate from the city is that it would cost about $25 million a year for the city to take that full burden back. I think you could also do a cost sharing thing where maybe the cost is 50-50, but we've got, people respond to incentives, and we've got to make it easier and more financially feasible for people to plant and keep trees out on the street, the park strips in front of their homes and businesses.
Probably 9 months ago, the New York Times Magazine had a very interesting layout on this issue, and it did 6 strips, horizontal strips, and mentioned the area where they took the picture. And the poorest, most rundown, high crime area had no trees, and then they ended up in areas which were in Manhattan that were heavily treed with low rates of problems. And air pollution was substantially less. Just to stay with our sponsor, most people may not realize that air pollution is worse the hotter the temperature is, and trees are definitely a great way to reduce that. That's
right. Well, one of the things that my office just put forward, and I hope passes with the budget this week for our next fiscal year, is a grant program that would enable each council district to partner with neighborhood associations and just residents within those districts to plant additional trees. And this would be a pilot that we could scale up, perhaps with external, maybe a corporate partner over time. But for the very reason you've noted, we did not design it to have an equal number of trees planted in each district, because not all districts are starting from the same point in terms of their urban canopy. And so we will be biasing those dollars and therefore new trees toward the districts that have the greatest deficits. And it's, as a former public school teacher on the East Side, and I'll tell you, as a soccer coach on the East Side for a couple of years, the lack of shade, the additional heat, the lower air quality is noticeable, and it has a real impact on people's quality of life, their health, their longevity. And I think it's really important that we make this investment, and the money is out there. We just have to prioritize it. So for much the same reasons as you may have left Watsonville, I left Sacramento. I had a reasonably good career as a baseball player, and that meant playing in 107-degree temperatures for baseball season. Would typically, my senior year, we started practicing on December 1st, and then I played on until almost the following September through that and American Legion. And it just was too doggone hot. But we better take our break. Let's take a 30-second break, and we'll be back, and we'll talk with Matt about climate change issues. See you in 30 seconds.
What it feels like to have an asthma attack is, well, you can't breathe, and you can't tell anybody that you're having an asthma attack because you can hardly talk. You can maybe say 1 or 2 words, but you can't say much else. Breathe California has helped me come in contact with more asthmatics and more people who have the same case as I do. It's important to me because I don't feel like I'm alone in the fight against asthma.
Welcome back. This is Breathe California TV. When I say Breathe California is the lung health organization for California, we have 5 chapters, and The one here in San Jose helps about 150,000 people a year with 13 different lung diseases, brochures in 20 different languages, one of which is COVID. And we're trying to do all we can on the side of both prevention and acclimating people to the issues. So, Matt, I mentioned we were going to be talking about climate change. And in fact, climate change and air pollution are essentially the exact same issue. So you want to talk about some of the things you've been doing on council on that?
Absolutely. And you know, I should just note as a personal aside, when I was in high school, I discovered I have a lung disease, and I had a couple of pneumothoraces. My lungs collapsed a few times. And so I appreciate your mission and the work that you're doing. It was just something I was born with. It wasn't environmental, but I still have a particular sensitivity, if you will, to respiratory issues. So I appreciate what you're doing. In terms of our work on the council, as folks may know, we have a climate smart plan for the city that's a fairly comprehensive framework that looks at buildings and land use and transportation and water use and a whole range of important components to having a healthy environment and addressing our climate crisis. We've recently, as a council, voted to set a goal, and it is, I believe it's a fairly aspirational goal, but I think that's okay. I think it's important to have a big, bold North Star that we're aiming for, and that is to be carbon neutral by 2030. And I think we all know there's a lot we have to do to get there. The city is, in fact, this week we're looking at building electrification again, and the framework we're using for transitioning our buildings. We are talking about removing parking minimums for new construction as we help facilitate this transition away from the single occupancy vehicle to alternative modes of transportation. We're gonna we can't continue to build 6 parking spaces for every car. So there's a lot that we're looking at around our 2 biggest sources of emissions, which are cars and buildings, essentially. And the theory of the case, of course, is to electrify everything and then ensure that the electrical grid that is providing that power is itself clean. And that's where, of course, we get into some real challenges around storage. I'm proud to say that San Jose's clean energy program is also investing in storage solutions now. So we're trying to scale up what you might call grid scale storage solutions. So there's a lot going on. At a very local level, I've also led the charge on banning gas-powered leaf blowers, which are highly polluting and extremely loud and quite a nuisance in the neighborhoods. So we're doing a pilot right now with electric leaf blowers through our Parks and Rec department. So those are just a few of the things we're working on.
So, Matt, one of the things that may not be well understood is San Jose Clean Energy. You still have PG&E involved in supplying electricity and natural gas. Could you give us kind of a summary of how the city's taken over much of that responsibility?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've used a state law that allows us to aggregate consumers, so businesses and individuals, residents within the city. And basically the way to think about it is that we've taken over the procurement or the power purchasing side of things. PG&E still has the underlying distribution and transmission infrastructure. And so they're back to being a more of a proper, at least in our case, utility that's managing the how we get the grid, essentially, whereas we decide where the power comes from, which gives us the flexibility to invest in more renewables, in storage solutions. And we believe that we can have a cleaner mix that's cost competitive, but that drives innovation. The big barrier, of course, is with the intermittency of solar and wind. We're going to need big purchasers like the city of San Jose to make bets on new storage solutions. So I'm excited about the work that we're doing. We've got to make sure we do it in a way that is cost effective for the community, but I'm very hopeful.
So state law, this is the Energy Commission, has required solar on all new homes. If
That's
I
correct.
recall, was that January 1st it went into effect?
I believe so. That
Yeah.
sounds right.
So you might quickly explain why, with all the alternative energy, we need more storage.
Well, the reason is that wind and solar are intermittent. They're unpredictable. In the middle of the day, the solar is actually pretty predictable. You can have overcast skies, but in the middle of the day, the cost of power in California drops dramatically, sometimes all the way to zero, because we have so much solar capacity. But most of the use is in the evening from 5 to 9 p.m. You also have the shift from summers to winters. And I know we're basically out of time here, but I'll just say, if we have to be able to capture that energy and store it and then shift it to when the demand is, in the evenings, in the winters, when we don't have as much generation capacity. And to do that at scale takes a lot of infrastructure, a lot of investment. And that's really the biggest barrier to further scaling up renewables.
So my girlfriend just covered her roof with solar, and to reinforce your point, got 3 enormous batteries to allow for when there's outages or in evening, which
Yep.
might be a problem. So as you noted, we're about out of time. What do you want people to remember from this?
Well, I hope that my hope would be that folks identify an element of the problem, whether it's transportation or it's our urban forest or it's these storage solutions. Find the piece of it that you're most interested in and come talk to whoever your council member is, or your mayor, or anybody at City Hall, because there are a lot of different ways for residents to plug in and be part of the solution. So I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, Terry. Thank you so much.
Just to follow up on that is, are there communication people at San Jose Clean Energy to help as well with that?
I would Google San Jose Clean Energy, and that'll probably get you oriented. Otherwise, you can always come to our office and we can make introductions for you. And I'm at District 10 at sanjoseca.gov.
Thanks again, Matt, for joining us. Good luck with all those issues.
Thanks so much, Terry. It's been a pleasure. Bye, everybody.
Bye.